You want to know like what specifically I didn't like about the everything? I just it isn't even just what other people have said that the story is a goddamn mess or anything. It's really just that what happened in the Endwalker lore just kind of seemed a little bit cheesy and eye-rolling-esque, and also, I mean, there is something that's very Square Enix about it, and everything, but it's the cheese of, it's the cheeseball nature of like the Final Fantasy series and everything. This is some of the parts of the lore in like the other Final Fantasy games that kind of always had us rolling our eyes as fans. Now, see, I like Final Fantasy. I'm a huge fan of it and everything, and so me coming out against Endwalker isn't, as a Final Fantasy hater. I'm not part of that. I'm actually a huge Final Fantasy fan, and everything. And although some of its latest entrants, not so much, as a time-based purist player, although Active Time Bubble is kind of like a pseudo, time too, and everything. But, as somebody that only plays those kind of games, I mean, but I've been part of the Final Fantasy community for a long time, and so I kind of have high expectations for, out of Square Enix as a company and everything. And I feel let down and disappointed again about story quality. And by the way, I'm not one of those people that is telling companies when you make a sequel or director that when you make a sequel, it has to outdo the former at all. Like I hate Spider-Man 3 with Sam Raimi's version of it. I hate the way that they ended the story and everything, and it kind of went to shit after, and leaving during Spider-Man 2 is something that I would have recommended anybody do, and just not consider the third part lore, canon at all, and just amputate it, because it doesn't matter. It's not good what they did with it and everything, and, Spider-Man 2 ended on a high note, and that's it, and anything, and I would recommend anybody do that, with the one where Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man, and everything, like they ruined it. So, anyways, Sam Raimi as a writer and everything, he too many hands were in the pie. There was too much battling against his vision for the movie. They tried to cram too many villains into the whole thing, and they overwhelmed him. And there were too many hands in the pie, so to speak, and so it just it tanked in quality, and so like the third one sucks, and everything. But it's the real mistake was in trying to outdo Spider-Man 2. It was fine, how that one went down and its ending. That was great, and everything, and just matching that would have been, just fine and everything. And it's this pressure that I think that these guys feel to constantly grow and outdo the former that it leads to a lot of this stuff. But it's also just that, if we read between the lines of Square Enix's own statements about this, they wanted to wrap the story up because they were concerned that it had already carried on for too long as it was. But, as a result, they kind of rushed to a conclusion, and what they put forward is kind of laughable. It's not. It's just difficult to take seriously how it ended and everything, and it just kind of has me rolling my eyes at all of it and everything. And oh, by the way, I've never been a fan of musicals. I've never liked them because I think that they kind of strike at, I guess you could say what the point of a fucking story is. Now, I like music, I like listening to it and everything, but I'm not a fan of like trying to wed, a movie and music into a fucking musical. Like I prefer them kept in their own lane. I don't want to see them hybridize, you know? And that's me. I don't like them and everything. And I think that, what happened here is not a musical, but it's kind of like it took a lot of its inspiration from that. And I have largely been, sort of rolling my eyes at the story that was presented in it and everything. And, it just very much so wasn't for me and everything. And I don't I want to note and I want everybody who plays Final Fantasy 14 today and or has played it in the past to know that I quit way back like a number of years ago because I didn't like the combat system in the game, and for an MMORPG that's kind of an unforgivable sin, to have a combat system that the player doesn't want to participate in and everything, and because MMORPGs aren't exactly driven by the lore, so to speak. But I was really into the Final Fantasy 14 lore and everything, and I really found a lot of like what was happening with the Askians and everything absolutely fascinating, and so I had been glued into it, watching and wondering where it was going to go and whys and everything, and then Endwalker drops, and I'm rolling my eyes at all of it. I find it overwhelmingly cheesy, very difficult to take seriously, way too lighthearted. And maybe that's what some people want, but not me. I mean, I haven't been pushing for that kind of thing in media. I like it dark and gritty and and everything a lot of the time. And I'm not. I guess you could say I'm not necessarily looking for that kind of lighthearted crap that they're pushing. And it went way too much in that direction, and it's like the story can't take itself seriously enough, and so much of it is in this kind of cheeseball territory. I mean, the whole them building a giant escape, ship out of the moon and everything, and the gigantic ship that they built to escape the planet and everything. Like this is some serious cheesy shit, and the worst part about it is that it's cheesy in a way that only Square Enix would write, and everything. It's there's something that's very like uniquely Square Enix about the cheesy nature of it and everything, and yet I don't know, like I know that because I've been a fan of the company for a long time. See, I'm not actually a Final Fantasy hater. I don't want to hate it. I don't want to dislike Endwalker, but I do, and everything, and that's been the experience that I'm having with it. Honestly, for many years I agreed with the people that were giving it, phenomenal reviews and everything, and they were giving Final Fantasy like 9 stars and everything. Like, I was with that kind of opinion about it. These were some of the highest quality games that in the gaming industry, period, and everything, and they deserve that golden reputation that they had for many years. But the lore in this one is just not up to standard and everything. And I know, I mean, we can look at Square Enix's own statements about it, and they said that they were afraid about the consequences of dragging the story out any longer, which, translated into basic, parsed into, English and everything between the lines of what they're saying. They're saying they rushed. They felt that they needed to wrap the story up, so they rushed to get it concluded and everything, and started writing, speeding the writing up to breakneck speed up to its conclusion and everything. And the problem with that is haste makes waste. You rush to make a story and everything, and you rush to wrap it up. Often you end up ruining the story in the process. I mean, Game of Thrones season 6 and 7 are universally panned. Almost everybody hates them. And that's despite the fact that the visuals that were happening were really, great cinematography and everything, but the story just went to shit after that. And, most people don't even want to remember season 7 at all. At all. They don't even want to be reminded of it, because they're so disappointed about how it went down and everything. And, I'm kind of feeling the same about Endwalker. I'm not a fan of. Anyways, I'm I'm at 6.0 being done at this point. I haven't even begun on 6.1. I don't know that I'm going to because I just don't like the way that this one went out and everything, patch wise. I know there's still some stuff that may be mildly interesting, like seeing what happened to the 13th and everything coming up, but I just, yeah, yeah. When Endwalker's, the expansion that was released at the time of the game itself and everything, when the expansion dropped, the first patch level that represented is now done, and yeah, that's about 12 hours of content, and I watched I pretty much finished it. I guess there's maybe like 10 minutes or so left and everything in the videos, and Yeah, I'm pretty much at the conclusion of it. You know, Meteon is has been defeated and everything, and the threat that she represents is already over, pretty much gotten to the point of its complete conclusion and everything. There's really no point in watching like the little tail end of it that's left. There's especially if you didn't enjoy the experience. So I don't know. I just I never asked Square Enix to outdo Shadow Tough Act about Dune because it was so good. It was so good and so interesting. But to not even come close to matching it this way, you know, to be this distant in quality from it is a letdown to say the least and everything. But I think a lot of the people that have been giving it phenomenal reviews can only do that from the perspective of a player. So those evaluations are not done on the basis of lore. They're done on the basis of how much you've enjoyed actually playing. If you want a challenge, you want to do challenging content. Yeah, I mean, good for you and everything. And I mean, this is very difficult combat that we're talking about, especially in the Savage Raids and everything. And good for you. More power to you. But your metric for evaluating it is probably going to be shaped from the perspective of a gamer, and I'm coming at this more from the perspective of a reader, or somebody that's watching, a show on TV. And if Endwalker was a TV show, it's bad.